Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. Okay, so I'm not usually one to share super personal stuff online. But what happened to me through Hinge was messed up enough that I feel like I need to warn people. I used Hinge on and off for a couple of years, met some decent people, had some blah dates, the usual dating app experience. But nothing prepared me for what happened with Daniel. I matched with Daniel like a year ago. His profile was pretty standard. Hiking pictures, a dog pic, a fun fact about his love for obscure documentaries. He seemed normal, maybe even a little boring, which was honestly a plus in my book after some of the wild cards I'd encountered on these apps. We chatted for a few days. Nothing too deep, just getting to know each other. He seemed genuinely interested in what I did, what I liked, etc. The conversation flowed easily, and he wasn't overly aggressive or pushy. So, I agreed to meet him for coffee. The coffee date was fine. He looked pretty much like his pictures, maybe a little less polished in person. He was a bit quiet, but I chalked it up to nerves. We talked about our jobs, our hobbies, the usual first date stuff. There weren't any major red flags, but there also wasn't a spark. I figured I wouldn't see him again, but I didn't regret meeting him. I texted him later that night, saying I had a nice time, but didn't really feel a connection. He responded saying he understood and wished me well. End of story, right? Wrong. About a week later, I started noticing weird things. I'd get a text from a random number saying something like, "Nice shoes today," or "Hope you enjoyed your lunch." Creepy, but I assumed it was just some kind of spam bot. I blocked the numbers and moved on. But then it escalated. I started getting emails with subject lines that referenced inside jokes from my conversations with Daniel. Things I hadn't told anyone else. My anxiety started creeping up. How did someone know these things? Then came the real kicker. One evening, I was walking home from work, and I saw Daniel across the street. He was just standing there, watching me. I froze. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just stared. It sent a chill down my spine. I quickly crossed the street and ducked into a store, waiting until I was sure he was gone before coming out. I was officially freaked out. I did a deep dive into Daniel's social media. His Facebook and Instagram were locked down tight, but I managed to find an old LinkedIn profile. Nothing alarming, just a basic work history. But then I noticed something. In the skills and endorsements section, there was a weirdly specific skill listed. Open Source Intelligence, OSINT. I Googled it, and OSINT is basically using publicly available information to gather intelligence on someone. It's like legal stalking. My blood ran cold. This guy had been using my public social media, combined with the information I'd given him on Hinge, to track me. I changed all my social media settings to private, deleted old posts, and made sure my location services were turned off. I even considered getting a new phone number. The texts and emails stopped for a while, and I started to breathe a little easier. Maybe he'd gotten bored and moved on. But then, a few months later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo of me sleeping in my apartment. It was taken from outside my window. I completely lost it. I went straight to the police. They took my statement, but basically said there wasn't much they could do unless he physically threatened me or broke into my apartment. Since he hadn't technically broken any laws, they couldn't arrest him. They suggested getting a restraining order, but that would require me to know his real name and address, which I didn't. All I had was his Hinge profile. I contacted Hinge and reported him, but all they did was ban his account. That didn't stop him from creating a new one. I felt helpless and terrified. I started sleeping with a baseball bat next to my bed, constantly checking my windows and doors. I was a prisoner in my own apartment. Finally, I decided I couldn't live like this anymore. I moved. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even my closest friends. I cut off all contact with people I didn't completely trust. It was a drastic step, but I felt like I had no other choice. It's been several months since I moved, and I haven't heard from Daniel since. I hope he's moved on to someone else, but I still can't shake the feeling that he's out there, watching. So, if you're using Hinge, or any dating app, please be careful. Don't give out too much personal information, and be wary of anyone who seems too interested in your life. Trust your gut, and if something feels off, don't hesitate to block and report. And for God's sake, check their skills on LinkedIn. You never know who's lurking behind those seemingly normal profiles. This wasn't just a bad date. This was a real-life horror story. This is the problem that many women go through, and it's real. This is a warning to everyone looking to date, using Hinge to watch out for red flags and be more protective, and make sure to keep your guard up in the dating world. Watch out for things that are too good to be true. Watch out for people who are too clingy or obsessed, and make sure to run a background check or look at social media of each user before fully committing or giving them the benefit of a doubt. Okay, so I'm still trying to wrap my head around this whole thing, but I feel like I need to tell someone, even if it's just a bunch of strangers on the internet. It happened last summer, and honestly, it's completely warped my view on online dating, specifically Hinge. I used to think Hinge was, the slightly less terrifying dating app. Supposedly more about connections than hookups, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. I'd been on Hinge for a few months, had gone on a handful of okay dates, nothing spectacular. Then I matched with Liam. He was striking. Not traditionally handsome, but something about his pictures just drew me in. Think intense eyes, messy dark hair, and a brooding artist vibe. His prompts were witty and insightful. He seemed genuinely intelligent and a little bit damaged, which, I'll admit, is a weakness of mine. We chatted for a couple of weeks, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He wasn't pushy or overly complimentary, just engaging and thoughtful. We had a lot in common: obscure indie bands, classic literature, a shared love of hiking. So, naturally, I was excited when he suggested we meet up. He suggested a hike in a state park about an hour outside the city. It seemed a little out there for a first date, but he'd mentioned he loved photography and knew some great spots with amazing views. I figured, why not? I told a couple of friends where I was going, shared Liam's Hinge profile, and made sure my phone was fully charged. Classic safety precautions. The day of the hike was beautiful. Sunny, crisp air, perfect for fall foliage. Liam was waiting for me at the trailhead, and he looked even better in person. That intense gaze was even more captivating. We started hiking, and the conversation was even better than it had been online. He was funny, articulate, and genuinely seemed interested in what I had to say. We talked about everything from our families to our biggest fears. About an hour into the hike, we veered off the main trail onto a smaller, less traveled path. He said it led to a secluded overlook with the best views in the park. I didn't think much of it at the time, but looking back, that's when things started to shift. The path became steeper and narrower, the trees grew denser, and the air felt colder. We hadn't seen another person in what felt like forever. Liam was still charming, but there was an edge to him that I hadn't noticed before. His jokes became a little darker, his questions a little more probing. He started asking about my past relationships, specifically how they ended. He seemed particularly interested in any exes who had wronged me. Then, he stopped abruptly in the middle of the trail. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice suddenly serious. I braced myself, thinking he was about to confess to being married or having some deep-seated trauma. But what he said next was far more unsettling. "I've been watching you," he said, his eyes fixed on mine, "for a while now." My blood ran cold. I tried to laugh it off, thinking it was some kind of twisted joke. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't laugh. He just stared at me, that intense gaze boring into my soul. "I know where you live. I know where you work. I know your friends. I know everything about you." Suddenly, all those little details I had shared with him online, all those seemingly innocuous facts about my life, felt like deadly weapons in his hands. I tried to keep calm, tried to rationalize what he was saying. Maybe he was just trying to scare me. Maybe he was mentally unstable. But the look in his eyes told me this wasn't a joke, and it wasn't a delusion. This was real. How did you know all that?" I stammered. He just smiled, a slow, chilling smile that sent shivers down my spine. "Let's just say I'm good at finding things out." He then reached into his backpack and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. He flipped it open and started reading aloud, reciting details about my life that I had never told him directly. He knew my favorite coffee shop, the name of my childhood pet, the make and model of my car. He even knew about an embarrassing incident from high school that I had only shared with one close friend. I was terrified, paralyzed with fear. I didn't know what to do, how to react. My phone was in my backpack, but I was too afraid to reach for it. I was trapped, alone in the woods with a man who knew everything about me and clearly wasn't right in the head. Why are you doing this? I finally managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. Because I wanted you to know that I care, he said, his voice dripping with sincerity. I care about you more than anyone else ever will, and I won't let anyone hurt you. That's when I realized this wasn't just about obsession. This was about control. He wanted to possess me, to protect me, to isolate me from the rest of the world. I knew I had to get away from him, but I didn't know how. I took a deep breath and tried to appear calm. Liam, I said, I appreciate you caring about me, but this is too much. This is making me uncomfortable. I think I need to go home. He frowned, his eyes hardening. You're not going anywhere, he said, his voice suddenly cold and menacing. We're just getting started. That's when I snapped. Adrenaline surged through my veins, overriding my fear. I kicked him as hard as I could in the shin, grabbed my backpack, and ran. I ran as fast as I could, stumbling through the trees, not knowing where I was going, just trying to get away from him. I could hear him behind me, crashing through the underbrush, yelling my name. I didn't dare look back. I just kept running, fueled by pure terror. I eventually stumbled back onto the main trail, where I finally saw other hikers. I ran towards them, screaming for help. Liam didn't follow me. He vanished back into the woods. I reported the incident to the police, showed them his Hinge profile, told them everything that had happened. They took it seriously, but they couldn't do much without concrete evidence. They searched the park, but didn't find him. I deleted Hinge that day and changed my phone number. I increased my home security, started carrying pepper spray, and became hyper-aware of my surroundings. I haven't been on a date since. The worst part is, I still don't know how he got all that information about me. I've checked my social media privacy settings, but everything seems secure. I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, watching me, waiting for another opportunity. I used to think Hinge was a safe way to meet people. Now, I realize that you can never truly know who's behind the profile, and that even the most harmless-seeming app can lead you down a path to a real-life nightmare. I still can't believe this actually happened. Okay, so, I need to preface this by saying I was, really trying to put myself out there. Pandemic hit me hard, you know? Isolated. Lonely. My friends were all coupled up, posting engagement photos and baby pictures, and I was swiping through Hinge, feeling like the last single person on Earth. I matched with this guy. Let's call him Ethan. His profile was normal. Maybe a little too perfect? Outdoorsy pictures, volunteering with dogs, witty answers to the prompts. Basically, a compilation of everything a girl would want in a boyfriend. He was cute, too. Not like movie star handsome, but definitely my type. We messaged back and forth for a few days. The conversation flowed easily, and he suggested we grab coffee. So far, so good, right? I met him at a cafe near my apartment. He was even more attractive in person and super charming. He actually listened when I talked, asked follow-up questions, the whole shebang. We talked for 2 hours, and I honestly thought, okay, maybe this is it. He walked me back to my place. We hugged, and he said he'd call me. Standard stuff. He texted me later that night, saying he had a great time, and we made plans for a second date the following weekend. We went to a cool little brewery, and again, it was amazing. We seemed to have so much in common, and I felt this weird, instant connection. I started getting that giddy feeling you get when you think you might actually be falling for someone. After the second date, things started to move fast. We were texting constantly, seeing each other a few times a week. He met my friends. I met a couple of his. He was always super affectionate, always telling me how much he liked me, how special I was. Looking back, I realize now it was love bombing, but at the time, I was just swept up in it all. About a month in, he started talking about the future, moving in together, traveling, even kids. It was a little intense, but I told myself he was just really into me. I wanted the same things, right? And it's not like I didn't like him, I did. Maybe I was also just desperate, or vulnerable, or something. I don't know. This is where it gets weird. One night, we were at his apartment watching a movie. It was late, and I was about to head home when he said, "Hey, I want to show you something." He seemed nervous, almost hesitant. He led me into his bedroom, which was surprisingly bare. No personal touches at all. Just a bed, a dresser, and a closet. He went to the closet and pulled out a wooden box. It was old, intricately carved, with a small brass lock. He unlocked it and opened it, and inside were pictures. Lots of pictures. Pictures of me. Not like selfies I'd posted online. These were pictures taken of me. Through my apartment window. At the grocery store. Walking my dog. Just candid shots of me going about my daily life. Some of them were zoomed in, kind of grainy, but there was no doubt it was me. I felt like I was going to throw up. I just stared at the box, speechless, my mind racing. He saw the look on my face, and his whole demeanor changed. The charming, affectionate guy vanished, replaced by someone cold and predatory. "I wanted you to know how much I care about you," he said, his voice low and almost robotic. "I've been watching you for a while. Before we even matched on Hinge. I knew we were meant to be together." My blood ran cold. I didn't say anything. I just backed away slowly, my eyes locked on his. He didn't move, just stood there, holding the box of pictures. "Don't you understand?" he said, taking a step closer. "This is proof. We're connected. I know everything about you." I turned and ran. I didn't say a word, just sprinted out of his apartment, down the stairs, and into the street. I didn't stop running until I was back in my own building, slamming and deadbolting the door behind me. I was shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. The police came, took a report. They went to his apartment, but he was gone, vanished. They said they'd put out a warrant for his arrest, but they didn't seem to take it that seriously. "He probably just got spooked," one of the officers said. "He'll probably just move on." I didn't feel reassured. I moved out of my apartment the next day. I broke my lease, paid the penalty, and found a new place in a completely different part of the city. I changed my phone number, deleted all my social media, and basically went into hiding. I still have nightmares. I see his face everywhere. I jump at every shadow. I haven't used Hinge or any dating app since. I don't think I ever will. It's not just about the stalking, it's the violation. The feeling that someone was watching me, studying me, planning this. I don't know. I'll never feel safe again. And the worst part, I still don't know how he found me in the first place. I had a different job than the one on my profile. I had a different address. Nothing matched. What were the chances? He'd been watching me before the app. He had been stalking me. Hinge will never seem the same, and I think I will be more scared to date from now on. Okay, so I need to tell someone about this. I haven't really talked about it because, honestly, it makes me sound insane. But it messed me up pretty badly, and maybe writing it down will help. It all started, predictably, on Hinge. I'd been using the app for a while, the usual endless swiping, a few okay dates, mostly just a time suck. Then I matched with Liam. He was different. His profile wasn't the typical gym selfies or group shots with his brothers. It was mostly pictures of nature, landscapes, close-ups of flowers, stuff like that. He seemed thoughtful, maybe a little introverted, which I found appealing. We chatted for a couple of weeks before agreeing to meet up. Our conversations were good, deeper than the usual Hinge banter. We talked about our fears, our dreams, what makes us feel alive. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He even remembered the small details I told him and brought them up later. It was honestly refreshing. We met at a small coffee shop near my apartment. He was taller than I expected, kind of lanky, with these intense blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. He was a little awkward, fidgety, but in a charming way. The date went well. We talked for hours, and I felt a real connection with him. We had a lot in common, and I enjoyed his company. After the date, he walked me home, and we kissed goodnight. It was a good kiss, not too aggressive, just sweet. We started seeing each other regularly after that. At first, everything was perfect. He was attentive, caring, and always made me laugh. We went on hikes, explored new restaurants, and spent cozy nights in watching movies. He introduced me to his friends, and they seemed to like me. I felt like I was finally in a healthy, fulfilling relationship. But then things started to get weird. It started with small things. He would show up at my apartment unexpectedly, saying he was just in the neighborhood and wanted to say hi. He would call or text me constantly throughout the day, asking what I was doing and who I was with. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured he was just really into me. But then it started to feel suffocating. He became possessive. He didn't like me spending time with my friends without him. He would get jealous if I even mentioned another guy. He started questioning my every move. demanding to know where I was going and who I was seeing. He started showing up at my work during my lunch break, just to surprise me. I tried to talk to him about it, telling him that I needed space and that his behavior was making me uncomfortable. But he would just get defensive, accusing me of not caring about him or of cheating on him. He couldn't seem to grasp that his need for constant validation was driving me away. One night, I went out for drinks with my friends. I told him I was going, but he was clearly unhappy about it. He texted me all night, asking me where I was, who I was with, and when I would be home. When I finally got back to my apartment, he was waiting for me outside. He was furious. He accused me of lying to him and of flirting with other guys at the bar. I tried to explain that he was being unreasonable, but he wouldn't listen. He started yelling at me, his face red with anger. I was terrified. I had never seen him like this before. I told him to leave, but he refused. He grabbed my arm, his grip tightening. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You're mine." I managed to break free from his grip and ran inside, locking the door behind me. He started pounding on the door, screaming my name. I called the police, and they arrived a few minutes later. They arrested him for harassment and trespassing. I got a restraining order against him. But even with the restraining order, I was still scared. I knew he was out there, and I didn't know what he was capable of. I started having nightmares. I couldn't sleep without checking all the locks on my doors and windows. I became paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder. I felt like I was being watched. One night, I woke up to a strange noise outside my window. I peered through the blinds and saw him standing there, staring up at my apartment. He was holding a bouquet of flowers. I screamed and called the police again. They came and took him away. But the fear didn't go away. I knew he would be back. He eventually violated the restraining order multiple times, and each time he did, my anxiety grew worse. He would leave notes on my car, send me emails, and even try to contact my friends and family. It was a constant barrage of harassment. I ended up moving to a different city to get away from him. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts, and cut off contact with anyone who knew him. It was like starting a new life. It's been 2 years since I moved, and I haven't heard from him since. But I still think about him sometimes. I still have nightmares. I still feel the fear. I don't think I'll ever be able to trust anyone completely again. And honestly, I'm terrified to use Hinge or any dating app ever again. It's a reminder that you can never truly know someone, even if you think you do. And that sometimes the person you meet online can turn out to be your worst nightmare. I really am still shaken up from this experience. Okay, so I've always been a bit of a dating app dabbler. Tried them all at some point, but Hinge was the one I kept coming back to. It felt less shallow, I guess. More about actual people, and less about just swiping through faces. I wasn't looking for anything super serious, but the idea of finding someone with a genuine connection was appealing. I'd had my share of awkward dates and ghosting situations, nothing too crazy, just the usual online dating woes. But then I matched with Ethan, and everything changed. His profile was intriguing. Thoughtful answers to the prompts. Photos that showed him doing cool stuff like hiking and playing guitar. He seemed intelligent, artistic, and genuinely kind. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. We had a lot in common, similar tastes in music, a shared love for obscure documentaries, and a dark sense of humor that clicked perfectly. He was funny, engaging, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me beyond just superficial stuff. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we meet up. We decided on a coffee shop near my apartment. The date went great. Ethan was even more charming in person. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. There was a definite spark, a real connection that I hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. We ended the night with a hug, and I couldn't wait to see him again. We went on a second date a few days later, then a third. Things were progressing quickly, but it felt natural, exciting. He was thoughtful, always remembering little details I'd mentioned in passing. He'd leave me sweet notes, surprise me with flowers, and make me feel like the most amazing person in the world. But then, things started to get weird. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible. He started asking more personal questions about my past, digging deeper into things I wasn't quite ready to share. He wanted to know about my childhood traumas, my past relationships, my deepest insecurities. At first, I brushed it off as him just being interested in understanding me, but it started to feel invasive, like he was trying to dissect me. He also started becoming increasingly possessive. He'd get jealous if I mentioned hanging out with friends, and he started subtly discouraging me from seeing them. He wanted all my attention, all the time. He'd text me constantly throughout the day, and if I didn't respond immediately, he'd get anxious and accusatory. I tried to talk to him about it, to express my concerns, but he'd always turn it around on me, making me feel like I was being unreasonable, like I was the one with the problem. He was incredibly manipulative, and I found myself constantly second-guessing my own feelings, wondering if I was just overreacting. One night, I woke up to find him standing over me, just staring. It was dark, and I couldn't see his face clearly, but the intensity of his gaze sent a shiver down my spine. When I asked him what he was doing, he just said he was making sure I was okay. He said he had a nightmare and wanted to check on me. I tried to believe him, but something felt off, deeply wrong. I started noticing other strange things. He seemed to know things about me that I hadn't told him. Details about my daily routine, conversations I'd had with friends, even things I'd searched for online. It was like he was watching me, constantly monitoring my every move. I started feeling paranoid, like I was being followed. I'd catch glimpses of him in places I didn't expect him to be. Outside my work, near my gym, even outside my apartment building when I knew he wasn't supposed to be there. I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence, but I knew in my heart that it wasn't. Then came the dreams, the nightmares. Vivid, disturbing visions of Ethan lurking in the shadows, watching me, whispering my name. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, heart racing, convinced that he was in the room with me. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow. One day, I decided to do some digging. I searched Ethan's name online, hoping to find something, anything, that would explain his strange behavior. What I found was far worse than I could have ever imagined. There were articles, news reports, blog posts, all detailing a series of disappearances, young women who had vanished without a trace. And in each case, there was a common thread, a man named Ethan, who had met them on dating apps. My blood ran cold. I felt like the world was spinning. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I was in danger. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and ran. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, didn't leave a note. I just disappeared. I went to a friend's house in another state, where I stayed for weeks, terrified to go outside, constantly looking over my shoulder. I eventually went to the police, told them everything. They launched an investigation, but Ethan was gone. He'd vanished without a trace, leaving no forwarding address, no digital footprint. It was like he'd never existed. To this day, they haven't found him. I moved to a new city, changed my name, and tried to rebuild my life. But the fear never really goes away. I still have nightmares about Ethan, about his dark eyes and his twisted smile. I see him in crowds, in strangers' faces. Every time my phone buzzes, I jump, convinced it's him. I haven't used a dating app since. I don't think I ever will again. The thought of putting myself out there, of opening myself up to that kind of vulnerability, is just too terrifying. What happened with Ethan changed me, scarred me in a way that I don't think I'll ever fully recover from. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. The worst part is, I still don't know if he truly was the cause of those disappearances, or if it was someone else. I just know he caused mine for a while. What happened next still haunts my dreams. I feel guilty for the women, as if I was too late to stop him. He stole my innocence and replaced it with terror. I'm constantly afraid he will find me again one day. So yeah, that was my experience with Hinge. Be careful out there, I suppose. You never really know who's on the other side of that screen. Okay, so I'm not usually one for dating apps. I always felt like they were a highlight reel of everyone trying to be their best selves, which, let's be honest, is rarely the real deal. But after my last relationship imploded in a spectacular dumpster fire of miscommunication and unspoken resentment, I decided to give Hinge a try. The whole designed to be deleted thing appealed to me. I figured, what's the worst that could happen? Famous last words, right? I matched with this guy named Liam. He was objectively attractive, brooding artist type, with a jawline that could cut glass. His profile was full of travel photos and philosophical quotes. He seemed deep, introspective, exactly the kind of antidote I needed to my ex's relentless surface-level optimism. Looking back, the first red flag was how intensely he pursued me. We matched, and within an hour, he commented on every single one of my photos and prompts. It was flattering, sure, but also a little much. Like he was trying too hard. I brushed it off. I was just being cynical, right? He was just enthusiastic. We messaged back and forth for a week, and the conversations were surprisingly good. He asked thoughtful questions, listened attentively, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He even remembered details from earlier conversations, which was a welcome change from the usual "hey" and "what's up" I was used to. But then, the second red flag popped up. He was a little too interested. He started asking about my daily routine, my work schedule, when I usually went to bed. Again, I told myself I was overreacting. He was just trying to make conversation. He was curious. We finally met up for coffee. He was even more attractive in person, but there was something off. His eyes were too intense, his smile a little too practiced. He dominated the conversation, steering it back to himself whenever I tried to talk about my own life. He kept touching my arm, my hand, my knee, subtle but constant. I felt a little suffocated. After the date, he walked me back to my car. As I was getting in, he leaned in close and whispered, "I had such a great time. I can't wait to see you again soon." He didn't ask if I wanted to see him again. He just declared it. Red flag number 3, waving frantically in my face. I should have ended it then. I should have unmatched him and blocked his number. But I didn't. I was lonely, and he was persistent. And honestly, a small part of me was intrigued. I wanted to see how far he would go. We went on a few more dates. Each one was more uncomfortable than the last. He was constantly testing my boundaries, pushing for more physical intimacy than I was comfortable with. He started showing up unannounced at my work, bringing me lunch or flowers. It was supposed to be romantic, but it felt possessive. He started calling me multiple times a day, and getting upset if I didn't answer immediately. He said he just wanted to know I was safe. Red flag number 4, blaring like an alarm. The turning point came one Saturday night. I had told him I was going out with friends for dinner. He seemed okay with it, but he kept texting me throughout the night, asking where I was, who I was with, what I was doing. I tried to be polite, but his messages were becoming increasingly demanding. Finally, I turned off my phone and tried to enjoy my evening. When I got home, there were dozens of missed calls and texts from him. He was furious. He accused me of lying to him, of cheating on him. He said he knew I was with another man. I tried to explain that I was just out with friends, but he wouldn't listen. He showed up at my apartment a few hours later, banging on my door, demanding to be let in. I was terrified. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my apartment, shaking with fear. The next morning, I went to the police station and filed a restraining order. It was a long and difficult process, but eventually I got it. Liam disappeared for a while. I thought it was over. I started to feel safe again. Then, a few months later, I started getting strange emails. They were anonymous, but they contained personal information about me. Things that only Liam would have known. They were unsettling, but not overtly threatening. Just creepy. I changed my email address, but the emails kept coming. They started to escalate. The sender threatened to expose my secrets, to ruin my life. I was terrified again. I went back to the police, but they said there was nothing they could do unless the threats became more specific. One night, I came home from work and found my apartment had been broken into. Nothing was stolen, but my belongings had been rearranged. My clothes were scattered on the floor, my furniture was overturned, and my walls were vandalized with hateful messages. I knew it was Liam. I packed a bag and left. I didn't go back. I moved to a different city, changed my name, and cut off contact with everyone I knew. I was starting over. I still look over my shoulder every day. I don't think I'll ever truly feel safe again. And it all started with a right swipe on Hinge. I ignored all of those red flags and fell right into a nightmare. Looking back, I wish I had trusted my gut. I wish I had deleted the app and moved on. But I didn't, and I paid the price. Dating apps, not for me. Okay, deep breaths. Here we go. This isn't easy to write, and honestly, I've avoided thinking about it for a long time. But maybe getting out there will. I don't know. Maybe it'll help someone else avoid the same situation. It started like any other Hinge match. His profile was normal. Pictures of him hiking, one with his dog, another at a concert. He listed his job as a software engineer, which, okay, boring, but stable. His prompts were witty enough, nothing too try-hard. We matched, and he messaged me almost immediately. His name was Mark. The first few days were fine. Normal Hinge banter. Where are you from? What do you do for fun? Standard getting to know you stuff. He seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. He wasn't overly aggressive or pushy, which was a welcome change from some of the other guys I talked to on the app. We had a lot in common, or so it seemed. We both loved indie movies, hiking, and trying new restaurants. After about a week of texting, he asked me out. We went to a small Italian place in my neighborhood. The date went well. He was funny, engaging, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. No red flags, no weird vibes. He walked me home. We kissed goodnight, and I honestly thought, okay, maybe this is something. We went out a few more times over the next couple of weeks. Each date was just as good as the last. We explored different parts of the city, went to museums, and even cooked dinner at my place one night. I was starting to really like him. I felt comfortable around him, which was rare for me. I'm usually pretty guarded, but with Mark, it felt easy to let my walls down. That's when things started to get off. It started subtly. He'd remember details about conversations we'd had weeks ago, things I'd barely remembered saying. He'd show up at my apartment with my favorite coffee, even though I hadn't mentioned I was craving it. It was sweet at first, thoughtful, but then it started to feel like he was paying too much attention. He also started asking more personal questions, digging deeper into my past. Questions about my family, my childhood, past relationships. I brushed it off as him just trying to get to know me better, but there was something about the way he asked them, the intensity in his eyes, that made me uneasy. Then came the comments about my appearance. Not outright negative ones, but observations. He'd notice if I changed my hair, even if it was just a slight trim. He'd comment on what I was wearing, even if it was something I'd worn a million times before. That blue sweater really brings out the color in your eyes. Harmless, right? Except it wasn't. It was like I was being studied. One night, we were watching a movie at my place, and I got up to get a blanket. When I came back, he was scrolling through my phone. I froze. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. He looked up, startled. "Oh, sorry," he said, with a sheepish grin. "I was just trying to see what kind of music you like. You didn't have your Spotify open." I snatched my phone back. "You don't just go through people's phones, Mark." He apologized profusely, said he didn't mean to invade my privacy. I was still shaken, but I let it go. I wanted to believe it was just a mistake. But it wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. He started showing up at places I hadn't told him I'd be. The coffee shop I went to on Saturday mornings, the bookstore I frequented after work. He'd act surprised, like it was just a coincidence. "Oh, hey, fancy seeing you here." But the look in his eyes told a different story. I started to feel like I was being watched. I tried to distance myself from him, to slow things down. I told him I was busy with work, that I needed some space. He didn't take it well. He'd text me constantly, call me multiple times a day. He'd show up at my apartment unannounced, saying he just wanted to check on me. One night, I was walking home from a friend's place when I saw him. He was standing across the street, under a streetlight, just watching me. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. I ran the last few blocks to my apartment, fumbling with my keys, terrified he was going to follow me. I finally got inside, locked the door, and leaned against it, gasping for breath. I peeked through the peephole, and he was still there, standing under the streetlight, staring at my building. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I went to the police. I told them everything that had happened, showed them the text messages, the missed calls. They said there wasn't much they could do. He hadn't technically broken any laws. He was just being clingy. They advised me to get a restraining order, but that required proof of harassment, which was hard to come by with what I had. I felt helpless. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts, and started staying with friends. I was terrified he'd find me, that he'd escalate. Weeks went by, and I didn't hear from him. I started to think maybe it was over, that he'd finally gotten the message. Then, one afternoon, I went back to my apartment to pick up some clothes. I was only there for a few minutes, just long enough to grab a bag and leave. As I was walking out the door, I noticed something strange. A small, white envelope was wedged under my doormat. My heart sank. I knew who it was from. I hesitated, then slowly picked it up. My hands were shaking. I opened the envelope and pulled out a small piece of paper. On it, written in neat, precise handwriting, was a single sentence. "I'm always watching." I moved again that day, and I never returned. I don't know where he is now. I don't know if he's still watching me. All I know is that I'll never use Hinge again. Some connections aren't worth making. The feeling of being hunted is the worst. I am careful because of Hinge. I learned a valuable lesson that day about trusting my gut, even when it's screaming at me in a crowded bar while a handsome stranger is buying me a drink. It was the summer after I turned 28. All my friends were getting married, having babies, buying houses, and I was swiping through Hinge, hoping to find someone to watch Netflix with who wouldn't ghost me after the second date. I wasn't looking for a soulmate, just someone decent and relatively normal. That's when I matched with Alex. His profile was pretty standard. A few pictures of him hiking, one with his dog, a clever bio about his love for craft beer and bad puns. He seemed like a good guy, the kind you could bring home to your parents without them immediately staging an intervention. We chatted for a week or so, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my favorite books. It was refreshing compared to the usual "hey" or "what's up" I usually got. He suggested we meet for drinks at a bar near my apartment. It was a popular spot, usually packed on a Friday night, so I felt relatively safe. I told a friend where I was going and who I was meeting, just in case. When I arrived, Alex was already there, waiting at the bar. He was even more attractive in person, tall, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. He bought me a drink, and we started talking. The conversation flowed easily. We had a lot in common, and he was funny and engaging. I started to think maybe, just maybe, I'd actually found someone worthwhile on a dating app. But then, things started to get weird. It started subtly. He asked a lot of questions about my apartment, where it was located, what floor I lived on, if I had any roommates. I brushed it off as casual curiosity, but the questions kept coming, more specific each time. He asked about my security system, if I had a peephole, how often I locked my windows. It started to feel less like friendly conversation and more like an interrogation. I tried to steer the conversation in a different direction, but he kept bringing it back to my apartment. He asked if I walked home alone at night, if I ever felt unsafe in my neighborhood. He even asked if I kept a spare key hidden outside. That's when the alarm bells really started ringing in my head. I told him I needed to use the restroom and excused myself. As I sat in the bathroom stall, trying to calm my racing heart, I realized something wasn't right. The way he was looking at me, the questions he was asking, it felt predatory. I knew I had to get out of there. I texted my friend, telling her I was feeling sick and needed a ride home. Then, I went back to the bar and told Alex I wasn't feeling well and had to leave. He seemed surprised, almost annoyed. He offered to walk me home, but I politely declined, insisting I just needed to lie down. He kept pushing, saying he wanted to make sure I got home safe. I stood my ground, telling him my friend was on her way. Finally, he relented, but he gave me a look that sent shivers down my spine. It was a look that said, "I'm not done with you yet." My friend arrived a few minutes later, and I practically jumped into her car. I told her everything that had happened, and she was just as freaked out as I was. We drove back to my apartment, and she insisted on walking me to my door. As we approached my building, I noticed someone standing across the street, watching us. It was Alex. He didn't say anything, didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me with that same unsettling look in his eyes. I quickly unlocked my door, rushed inside, and slammed it shut, locking all the bolts. I peeked through the peephole, and he was still there, across the street, watching. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my apartment, terrified. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The next day, I blocked Alex on Hinge and all other social media platforms. I changed my locks, installed a security system, and started carrying pepper spray. For weeks, I was paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder, convinced that Alex was lurking somewhere nearby. I eventually moved to a different apartment in a different neighborhood. I never saw Alex again, but the experience left a lasting impact. I'm much more cautious about who I meet online, and I always trust my gut, no matter how irrational it may seem. That day, I learned that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most normal, that charm and good looks can be a mask for something much more sinister, and that trusting your instincts can save your life. Hinge isn't where I'm going to find my significant other. Okay, so I'm not usually one for online dating. I always felt like it was kind of impersonal. But after my last relationship imploded spectacularly, my friends convinced me to give Hinge a try. It's for relationships, not just hookups, they said. You might actually find someone decent. So, reluctantly, I created a profile. I put up some semi-decent pictures, wrote a witty bio, and started swiping. That's when I matched with Liam. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs plastered all over his profile, but at the time, I was blinded by what I thought was genuine interest. His pictures were staged. Not like professional photo shoot staged, but carefully curated. Like he'd spent hours choosing the perfect angles and filters. There was one of him hiking, another of him volunteering at an animal shelter, and a few of him looking pensively out of coffee shop windows. He looked perfectly nice. Too perfect, maybe. But again, I ignored the little voice in the back of my head. His prompts were even more telling. One said, "My greatest strength is my empathy." Okay, that's nice, but it felt performative. Another said, "I'm looking for someone who is open-minded and willing to explore the depths of human connection." Depths of human connection? What does that even mean? Alarm bells should have been ringing, but I was too busy being flattered that someone seemingly so profound was interested in me. The conversation started off normal enough. We talked about our jobs, our hobbies, our favorite movies, but it quickly became intense. He'd ask me these incredibly personal questions, probing into my past traumas and insecurities. At first, I thought it was just him being deep and trying to get to know me on a deeper level. But then it started feeling like an interrogation. He'd remember every detail I told him, even the ones I barely registered myself. He'd bring them up weeks later, twisting them into arguments or using them to manipulate me. He also had this way of love-bombing me. He'd shower me with compliments, tell me I was the most amazing, intelligent, beautiful woman he'd ever met. He'd text me constantly, all day, every day. If I didn't respond immediately, he'd get anxious and start sending me a barrage of messages. It felt suffocating, but I was so caught up in the attention that I didn't realize how unhealthy it was. We met up for our first date a week after we matched. He chose a small, out-of-the-way restaurant. I should have suggested a more public place, but I didn't want to seem closed off or unadventurous. As he put it, the date itself was strange. He spent most of the time talking about himself, his accomplishments, his philosophies. He barely asked me anything about myself. He kept staring at me, too, like he was trying to see through me. It made me incredibly uncomfortable, but I chalked it up to nerves. After the date, he texted me, "I felt such a deep connection with you tonight. I think we're destined to be together." Destined to be together? After one date? That's when the red flags really started waving. But by that point, I was already emotionally invested. I wanted to believe that he was genuine, that I'd finally found someone who understood me. Over the next few weeks, the relationship escalated quickly. He pressured me to spend all my time with him, isolating me from my friends and family. He became increasingly jealous and possessive, accusing me of flirting with other men, even when I was just talking to a waiter. He started controlling my behavior, telling me what I could wear, who I could talk to, where I could go. One night, we were arguing about something stupid, and he suddenly grabbed my arm. Not hard, but enough to make me flinch. That was the moment I realized I was in danger. I tried to break up with him, but he wouldn't let me. He cried. He begged. He promised he'd change. He said he couldn't live without me, that I was his soulmate. I was terrified. It took me weeks to finally break free. I had to get my friends involved, change my number, and even get a restraining order. He stalked me for months, sending me threatening messages and showing up at my apartment. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid of what he might do. Even now, years later, I still have nightmares about Liam. I'm still hesitant to trust people, especially men. I learned a hard lesson about online dating and the importance of listening to my gut. Looking back, the warning signs were there from the beginning. The staged pictures, the intense prompts, the rapid escalation, the controlling behavior. They were all red flags that I ignored. I was so desperate for connection that I overlooked the danger signs, and it almost cost me everything. Now, I realize that being alone is far better than being with someone who makes you feel afraid. I'll never ignore my instincts ever again. The depths of human connection turned out to be the depths of my own personal hell. Okay, so I need to preface this by saying I'm a pretty level-headed person. I don't scare easily, and I tend to look for rational explanations before jumping to conclusions. But what happened to me after matching with someone on Hinge? I still can't fully explain it. And honestly, just thinking about it makes my skin crawl. I was using Hinge after a particularly brutal breakup. You know, the usual rebound thing, trying to convince myself I was ready to move on. I wasn't really looking for anything serious, just someone to grab a drink with and maybe take my mind off things. Then I matched with Liam. His profile was intriguing. Not your typical Hinge bro. He had these brooding, artistic photos, black and white shots of him in what looked like abandoned buildings, close-ups of his hands covered in paint, that kind of thing. His prompts were thoughtful, a little dark, but in a way that felt almost magnetic. He said he was a sculptor, worked mostly with metal, and that he found beauty in decay. I know, it sounds like a total cliché now, but at the time, I was hooked. We started chatting, and the conversations were intense right away. He wasn't into small talk. He wanted to talk about life, death, the meaning of existence. He asked me about my fears, my dreams, my deepest insecurities. It was way too much, way too fast, but I was drawn to it. It felt different from the mindless swiping and surface-level conversations I was used to. After a few days of this, he asked me out. He suggested meeting at a gallery opening in a part of town I didn't know very well. I hesitated. Something felt off, but I told myself I was being paranoid. It was just a date, right? The gallery was in this old, industrial building, the kind with exposed brick and high ceilings. The art was strange. Lots of abstract sculptures made from scrap metal, twisted and contorted into grotesque shapes. It fit Liam perfectly. When I met him, he was even more intense in person. Tall, pale, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through me. He was wearing all black, and he had this way of moving that was almost unsettling, like a predator sizing up its prey. We spent the evening wandering through the gallery, him explaining the art in this hushed, almost reverent tone. He talked about how metal held memories, how it absorbed the energy of the things it had witnessed. It was all a bit much, but I was still intrigued. Then he started talking about his own work. He said he was working on a new piece, something that would capture the essence of human emotion. He wouldn't tell me what it was, but he said it was his most ambitious project yet. As the night went on, Liam became more and more intense. He kept touching my arm, staring into my eyes, asking me questions about my past. He wanted to know about my relationships, my family, my childhood traumas. It felt like an interrogation, not a date. I started to feel really uncomfortable. I told him I had to go, that I wasn't feeling well. He didn't try to stop me, but he gave me this strange, knowing look that made my blood run cold. He said, "I understand, but you can't run from your true self." I practically ran out of the gallery and into a waiting Uber. I didn't breathe easy until I was back in my apartment. Doors locked, curtains drawn. I blocked Liam on Hinge and tried to forget the whole thing. But that's when the weirdness really started. A few days later, I started getting messages from an unknown number. Just a single word each time. Watched. Seen. Known. I blocked the number, but the messages kept coming from different numbers. It was like he was toying with me. Then I started noticing things in my apartment. Small things, like a book moved from one shelf to another, or a picture frame slightly askew. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was just paranoid, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger every day. One night, I woke up to a noise in my living room. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and crept out of my bedroom. The TV was on, playing static, and on the screen, scrawled in what looked like blood, was a single word: Liam. I screamed and ran back to my bedroom, slamming the door and locking it. I called the police, but when they arrived, the TV was off, and there was no sign of anything amiss. They said I was probably just stressed and suggested I get some rest. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the entire night huddled in my bed, clutching the knife, listening to every creak and groan of the building. The next day, I decided I had to do something. I couldn't live like this, constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering when Liam was going to strike again. I did some digging online and found his address, an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city. I know it was a stupid idea, but I felt like I had no choice. I had to confront him, to make him stop. I drove out to the warehouse that afternoon. It was even more creepy and isolated than I had imagined. The building was dark and dilapidated, with boarded-up windows and graffiti-covered walls. I hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and walked inside. The air was thick with dust and the smell of metal. The warehouse was filled with sculptures, the same twisted, grotesque creations I had seen at the gallery. Then I saw him. Liam was standing in the center of the warehouse, working on something. He was shirtless, his body covered in sweat and metal shavings. He didn't seem to notice me. I walked closer, and that's when I saw what he was working on. It was a sculpture, a life-sized figure of a woman, contorted into a position of terror. And the face was mine. I gasped, and Liam turned around. He smiled, a slow, predatory smile that made my skin crawl. "I've been waiting for you," he said. "I knew you'd come." He started walking towards me, and I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. "Stay away from me," I said, my voice trembling. "I can't," he said. "You're part of my art now. You're part of me." He lunged at me, and I screamed. I don't know what happened next. Everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, my head throbbing. The police were there, asking me questions. They said they found me unconscious in the warehouse, next to Liam's body. He was dead. They said he had been working on the sculpture for months, that he had become obsessed with me after our date. They found evidence of stalking, harassment, and even kidnapping. They said he was a dangerous man, a psychopath. They never found out exactly what happened in the warehouse. All I know is that I'm alive, and he's not. But I'll never forget the terror of that night, the feeling of being hunted, the realization that someone I met on Hinge could be capable of such evil. I haven't touched a dating app since. The thought of it still makes me sick. Okay, so I'm not usually one for sharing super personal stuff online, especially not stuff that makes me sound, well, a little unhinged myself. But honestly, I wish someone had warned me about this Hinge experience. Maybe if I'd heard a similar story, I would have run a mile. It started like any other dating app story. Freshly single after a messy breakup, I downloaded Hinge, hoping to find some distraction, maybe a few laughs. I'm pretty average looking, nothing special, and I usually just go for guys who seem normal. You know, good jobs, decent hobbies, no obvious red flags plastered across their profile. Then I matched with Liam. Liam was different. He wasn't conventionally handsome, not in the typical Hinge handsome way, but he had this intense gaze in his photos, this kind of brooding energy that I found strangely captivating. His profile was sparse, just a few quirky answers to the prompts, hinting at sharp wit and a bit of a dark side. He said his biggest fear was dying without truly experiencing something real, and his go-to karaoke song was Hurt by Johnny Cash. Dramatic, I know, but for some reason, it appealed to me. We started chatting, and he was just as intriguing in messages. He wasn't your typical flirtatious guy. He didn't shower me with compliments or cheesy pickup lines. He asked deep, thought-provoking questions, challenging my perspectives and making me think about things in a new way. He talked about philosophy, art, and the search for meaning in a meaningless world. He was stimulating. We met up for coffee a few days later, and the connection was even stronger in person. He was even more intense than I expected, his eyes dark and piercing, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers down my spine. He listened intently when I spoke, making me feel like I was the only person in the room. We talked for hours, losing track of time, and when we finally said goodbye, I felt a strange pull, this undeniable feeling that I needed to see him again. We started seeing each other regularly after that. Dinners, museums, long walks in the park. He was always engaging, always challenging, always there. He was intensely focused on me when we were together, making me feel like I was the most important person in his world. It was intoxicating. But then things started to shift. He started asking more personal questions, probing into my past, my insecurities, my deepest fears. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured he was just trying to get to know me better. But the questions became more and more intrusive, more and more specific. He wanted to know every detail of my past relationships, every mistake I had ever made, every regret I carried. He also started showing up unexpectedly. He'd swing by my apartment just to say hi, or call me late at night, needing to talk. He'd say he just wanted to be close to me, that he couldn't stand the thought of being apart. At first, I found it endearing, a sign of his intense affection. But then it started to feel suffocating. I started noticing other strange things too. He seemed to know things about me that I hadn't told him. He'd reference conversations I'd had with my friends, or mention details about my work that I hadn't shared with him. I tried to brush it off as coincidence, but the feeling that he was watching me, that he knew more than he should, grew stronger every day. One night, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw a photo that stopped me dead in my tracks. It was a picture of my living room, taken from outside my window. It was recent, too, because I could see the new plant I had just bought sitting on the windowsill. The caption read, "Thinking of you." My blood ran cold. I knew, without a doubt, that Liam had taken that picture. I confronted him about it the next day, and he didn't deny it. He just smiled that unsettling smile of his and said, "I just wanted to make sure you were safe." He tried to play it off like he was being protective, that he was just looking out for me. But I knew it was more than that. It was control. It was obsession. I tried to break up with him, but it wasn't easy. He was incredibly manipulative, guilt-tripping me, begging me to stay, promising to change. He said he couldn't live without me, that I was the only thing that made his life worth living. I felt trapped, like I was caught in a web of his making. It took weeks of agonizing arguments and increasingly desperate pleas, but I finally managed to end things. I blocked him on all social media, changed my phone number, and even considered moving apartments. I was terrified of what he might do. For a while, things were quiet. I didn't hear from him, didn't see him anywhere. I started to breathe a little easier, thinking maybe he had finally gotten the message. Then one day, I received a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. Inside, there was a single object, a framed photo of me, sleeping in my bed. On the back, scrawled in messy handwriting, was a single word: forever. I called the police, showed them the photo, told them everything. They took it seriously, but there wasn't much they could do without concrete evidence of a crime. They advised me to get a restraining order, which I did, but it didn't make me feel any safer. I still don't know how he got that picture. I still don't know how he found my new address. I still don't know what he's capable of. I'm sharing this story because I want to warn other women about the dangers of online dating. Be careful who you match with. Do your research. Trust your instincts. And if something feels off, don't ignore it. Get out while you still can. I wish someone had warned me about Liam. Maybe if they had, I wouldn't be living in constant fear, wondering when he's going to show up again. This is my true Hinge horror story. Be careful who you swipe right on because you never know what demons they possess. Okay, so writing this down is already making my hands sweat, but here we go. It started like any other Hinge match. His name was Liam, and his profile was normal. Maybe a little too normal, looking back. Pictures of him hiking, at a brewery, smiling with his dog. Generic, but in a reassuring way. He seemed like a safe bet, you know. I'd been on Hinge for a few months, mostly striking out with guys who were either aggressively boring or clearly just looking for hookups. Liam was different. He actually seemed interested in getting to know me. We messaged back and forth for a week or so, and the conversations were easy. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my family. Nothing out of the ordinary. He was a good texter, responsive but not clingy. He even made me laugh a few times. So, I agreed to meet him for coffee. The coffee date went well. He was just as charming in person as he was online. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, and he made me feel comfortable. There weren't any immediate red flags. He wasn't overly touchy, didn't dominate the conversation, and wasn't rude to the barista. Classic green flags, really. By the end of the date, I was actually looking forward to seeing him again. We went on a few more dates over the next few weeks. Movies, dinner, a walk in the park. Each time, I felt more comfortable with him. He was kind, considerate, and seemed to genuinely care about my feelings. He even remembered small details about things I told him. I started to think maybe, just maybe, this could be something real. Then things started to get weird. It started subtly. Little things that I couldn't quite put my finger on. He started showing up at places I hadn't told him I'd be. Once, I was grabbing lunch with a friend, and he just happened to be there, eating alone at a nearby table. He said it was a coincidence, that he just liked the restaurant. I brushed it off, but it felt off. Another time, I mentioned in passing that I was going to a yoga class. The next day, he texted me saying he decided to try yoga too, and asked if I knew of any good studios. I suggested the one I went to, and wouldn't you know it, he ended up in the same class as me. Again, he said it was just a coincidence. The coincidences kept piling up. He started asking me questions about my schedule, about where I lived, about my friends. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I thought he was just trying to get to know me better. But then the questions became more pointed, more intrusive. He wanted to know exactly when I left for work, when I got home, who I talked to during the day. One night, I was walking home from a friend's house, and I saw him standing across the street. It was late, and the street was mostly deserted. He was just standing there, in the shadows, watching me. When I made eye contact with him, he didn't say anything. He just smiled, a slow, unsettling smile, and then turned and walked away. That's when I started to get really scared. I tried to break things off with him, but he wouldn't let me. He kept calling, texting, showing up at my apartment. He said he just wanted to talk, that he didn't understand why I was pushing him away. But his tone was changing. He went from being sweet and understanding to being angry and demanding. One day, I came home from work to find my apartment door unlocked. I knew I had locked it when I left. I cautiously opened the door and stepped inside. The apartment was dark and silent. I called out Liam's name, but there was no answer. I slowly made my way through the apartment, checking each room. Everything seemed to be in order, but something felt wrong. The air was heavy, and I had the distinct feeling that I was being watched. Then I went into my bedroom. Liam was sitting on my bed, in the dark. He was holding a knife. I screamed and ran. I ran out of the apartment, down the stairs, and out into the street. I didn't stop running until I reached a police station. I told the police everything. They took me seriously, but they said they couldn't do anything until Liam actually committed a crime. They advised me to get a restraining order, which I did, but the restraining order didn't stop him. He kept calling, texting, sending me emails. He even started leaving things on my doorstep, flowers, chocolates, and creepy notes. I was living in constant fear. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Liam was always watching me. Then one night, I was awakened by a noise outside my window. I cautiously peered through the blinds and saw Liam standing in my yard, staring up at my window. He was holding a gasoline can. I called the police again, but by the time they arrived, Liam was gone. They searched the area, but they couldn't find him. I knew I couldn't stay in my apartment any longer. I packed my bags and moved to a new city, a place where Liam would never find me. It's been years since that happened, but I still have nightmares about Liam. I'm still afraid to date, afraid that I'll meet someone like him again. I deleted Hinge a long time ago. The experience has taught me that appearances can be deceiving, and that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most normal. I barely told anyone. I'm telling you because it happened, and it feels like I'm unloading a burden. I still check the locks,